Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we are going to take a look at Chapter 24 of the hot new manga, Kaiju number 8. This has been a highly anticipated chapter because of where the last one left us at a massive cliffhanger. So let's just jump into the non-spoiler section first. I don't usually do a non-spoiler section, but there was a few things, well, really one thing that I thought was well worth noticing that didn't really have to do with the immediate plot. First is the massive character growth we get to see in Kafka, and the simply masterful way the creators show it. At the beginning of the series, Kafka was, at least on a surface level, quite the loser. He did have a well-paying job. He was a civil servant, and he appreciated the fact that he was serving other people. But he had a nice apartment, but Kafka himself felt that his life was in shambles around him, and with a very few panels in the middle of the first chapter, the creator shows us this. If you remember back to chapter 1, Kafka, after the first day of cleaning up that salamander kaiju, Kafka was having a casual moment after work, having a drink before going to bed. He is in his apartment with the blinds closed and the television on. He's completely encased, alone, isolated. His clothes are slovenly, his body is slack. His face is creased with fatigue and poor health. He's smoking, he's drinking. His surroundings are cramped and cluttered for all that there's plenty of space in the room. He is clearly not taking care of himself or his surroundings. He is, in short, the kind of man who doesn't clean his room. Now, in this chapter, we get a very similar scene. Kafka is in a casual situation at the end of a long day after work, and he is once again alone. He is having a drink before he heads off to bed, and his clothes are the same kind of soft, easy-to-rumple bed clothes that he was wearing before. But everything is different. He's standing tall, he's wearing his clothes with confidence, and his face is radiating this quiet confidence. He no longer feels that his life is in shambles. And I think on a very metaphorical level, the space around him is clear, open, and tidy. And it's open to the sky. He's still technically alone in this image, but he's connected to the rest of the universe, as it were. And there's just this funny little... It's not even a quarter or an eighth of a panel, just a little side panel that shows him, instead of just dropping his beer cans everywhere, he carefully tosses his juice can in the recycling bin. It's a really telling little scene that separates, and I've put up these 3 images. It was the 3 beats from the first scene I'm talking about and the 3 beats of the second scene. And you can just see what a difference there is in his life. It's still Kafka. He still has these same behavioral tics that you can see clearly, but his whole spirit has just changed. And I think this is just masterful storytelling on the part of creators. And I could talk a lot longer on this subject, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to do a whole separate video on it just as a masterclass in short visual storytelling. Okay, folks, now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the spoiler section, so if you're not interested in hearing spoilers this early, shoo, vamos, scram! While we wait for you to wipe the grease off your fingers so you can touch the screen of your phones and click away, I will give a little pitch. Do you want to read a book where humans are the giant unstoppable behemoths? Then check out Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data on Amazon at the link below the video. Monty Python meets Star Trek in this book of human absurdity. So, I warned you, there are spoilers coming. Alright, so anyway, I will not say that this chapter was a disappointment, as the distressing feeling I felt as I turned the last page was not anything like disappointment. Rather, it was that feeling you get when you miss the last step and your body plunges into empty space as your soul packs its bags in preparation to depart this fragile vessel. The chapter, despite having the regulation number of pages and panels, was far too short, or rather, it felt far too short. Because believe me, I counted. I went back after reading and counted the pages because I was sure we had been shorted. But nope, I had just been so caught up in the story that it went by far too fast. We start off with a simple scene. Vice Captain Hoshina, who was supposed to be headed to bed after scaring the mental fluids out of Kafka in the training room last chapter, is instead in his office reviewing his files on Kaijus number 8 and 9. On an arch notes, these panels really illustrate the genius of the artist. Vice Captain Hoshina is theoretically just sitting there, but every panel is dynamic. In the first, he is stretched out with his hands linked behind his head in the classic, taking a moment to think outside the box position. Try that pose for a second. Just take your hands, intertwine your fingers behind your neck, spread your elbows out like wings, and arch your spine. You can feel your brain pop out of the mental track it was in and start thinking in broader terms. This is wonderful acting. I know it's just a drawing, but this is what an actor would do to communicate something, and the drawer and the artist represents that. It tells us a lot about Hoshina. For all that he is straight-laced, and looks it, he at least tries to think outside the box. It also gives a sense of movement that almost no other position would, because you know that the moments before this scene that you see, he was bent over his computer. A moment later, he will release that impossible to hold position. He will then shake out his arms and bend back over his work. That is 4, maybe 5 movement beats, all projected onto your brain with only one panel, and not a quarter of a page in size. The impression of constant movement was so strong that when I was writing this, before I went back to double check my impressions, I was sure that the scene had taken at least 3 pages to outline. No, it was 2 panels, neither of which was even a half-page panel. This also tells us about Hoshina's character. He knows perfectly well that sleep is important, and he makes sure that at least his hardworking officers get plenty of sleep. Hoshina is very much the dad friend after all. And here he is, working himself to the bone to figure out what is up with the humanoid Kaiju. Kaiju because they are such a threat to his precious little officers. As far as he knows, he is the only person qualified to do this, because he is the only person who has first-hand combat experience with the wake of Kaiju number 9's chaos and direct personal experience with Kaiju number 8. So there he is, burning the midnight oil again, stressing over a computer screen after a long day of pushing his body to the limit image training. Something struck me about the last panel, and I'm sorry for skipping all the juicy details of infiltration, combat, and heroic sacrifices, but this does seem to be the proper place to discuss what I noticed. Going into the final battle scene, there really do appear to be bags under Hoshina's eyes and stress lines on his face, which makes sense. You see, there are limiters in those combat suits, and no machine gets a limiter put on it unless there are nasty consequences to using them at high strength. And the most obvious example is that there are limiters in the human body. Your fists have the strength to crush concrete, but it would because your bones are that strong, but it would damage the soft tissue and the joints and the muscles so badly that your body doesn't let you do it. Try to punch something really hard. Not really, but you know what? I'm sure as a child you tried to punch something really hard once. The first time you can punch it really hard and hurt your wrist really bad. The second time, you almost physically can't punch the wall that hard. Your brain has limiters, so you never use your full strength. Now, if these suits have limiters, this strongly suggests a couple of different things. You don't put limiters on things unless there are very severe consequences for using them at strengths past the limiter. And while the obvious concept of you don't want anybody walking around with the capacity to absentmindedly cut a concrete pylon in half, as demonstrated by how badly Kaiju number 8 messed up the hospital room when he first kind of awakened to his Kaiju number 8 body, there is another side effect that drawing 90-odd% of the suit's power almost certainly takes a toll on the body of the officers. Given the fact that Hoshina couldn't even stand after confronting Kaiju number 8, given the fairly short 2 weeks or so that have passed, given that Hoshina has been pushing himself with the image training, given that he is currently low on sleep, I think we can say with confidence that Hoshina is going into this fight with his impressive skills highly impeded by his own physical limits. Here's another potential issue. In order to fight Kaiju number 8, Hoshina had to request that his limiter be removed. We don't know if he is physically capable of removing the limiter himself. Is it something handled by control, where he can't remove the limiter, or does he just need to ask their permission as a matter of tradition, military orders of operation? Either way, Hoshina is in trouble. We know that some Kaiju can throw up an interference barrier, and if Kaiju number 9 could do it, it's no stretch to imagine that Kaiju number 10 can. If Hoshina is trapped inside of a barrier, without communication, he either won't be able to release the limiter, or he will have to release it without formal permission. And add that to the concept that I am very sure the creators are setting Hoshina up for a court-martial after all is said and done, and I think we have some tough times ahead for our beloved bowl-cut vice captain. As for the main body of the chapter, the kaiju that are attacking are dragon types, and once more Kafka's specific knowledge and the general overview he gets from being left out of the main combat areas allows him to identify them. And there's this massive oddity he notes in their behavior. This in turn allows him to warn Vice Captain Hoshina about the threat to the Vice Captain specifically, hopefully in time to be useful. It looks like Hoshina's prepared in the last image of the chapter. Then the chapter ends on the cliffhanger, but I want to talk about these dragon kaiju some more. They are awesome. Of course, they are absolutely, completely scientifically unplausible. Nothing that heavy with wings that tiny in respect to their body could ever fly. So maybe the inside of their bodies are giant gas pockets, so they're more like kaiju blimps than kaiju dragons, or more like kaiju blimps than kaiju airplanes, but that wouldn't give them much combat ability unless they were really tough. I don't know. This is the rule of cool we're talking about. These are kaiju. Godzilla couldn't exist. King Kong couldn't exist because they'd be crushed under the weight of their own bodies. Dragons don't exist in any size today. We don't have giant dragons because our atmosphere won't accept the limitations on them. They're too big to fly. They're too big to fly. Their wings are too small. Yada yada yada, so forth. There's ways around this. Gas bubbles inside them, just like fish have swim bladders. I don't know if that's where they're going to go with this. If these kaiju do have gas pockets inside of them, there's going to be some even more spectacular explosions when people start popping them off. And that actually would give Hoshina a real chance to shine, because he could go in there with their swords and slice and dice, maybe without setting off the gas pockets like a ranged plasma rifle will do, which appears to be what their ranged weaponry is. But we don't know. But the dragons are just awesome, and I've just gone completely off script. So the chapter ends on a cliffhanger, and I don't see how they're going to wrap this up in one more chapter. So that probably means we will have another cliffhanger over the monthly break. On the other hand, there was like a bottom band like you get on the TV that says this is part 2 of 3. So maybe we're going to get an extra long chapter. Maybe the writers are just good enough to wrap up this plot line in one more chapter. I don't know. But I will be preparing my screaming pillow in advance just in case we end on another cliffhanger. So what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Is the story setting Vice Captain Hoshina up for a court-martial? Leave a comment below letting me know what you think, and check out Humans Are Weird. I Have the Data, a book of human absurdity. The paperback and electronic versions are both available on Amazon. See the link below. If you want to order a signed author copy of the first edition, which is much higher quality, email me, and peace out, my wonderful viewers.